Hi there, this is Michael EJ coming to you with another video explaining the PVGO process and how it can be used. And I'll actually like to take a different approach. I love basketball. I love the NBA. I keep up with it nonstop. And just randomly, I've looked deeper into how NBA franchises or any professional teams are valued. And every year, Forbes release their estimated values for all the NBA franchises. So I wanted to apply the methodology that I have, the PVGO thought process, and apply to these NBA valuations and see which franchises would be a great investment if, of course, given the opportunity. Lately, there's been a lot of money flowing through the NBA. There's been large increases in TV deals with ESPN and ABC, about 24 billion for 9 years. In 2014, a deal was signed, and it tripled the last deal. Nike signed a big deal with the NBA, become the official partner, and it was bigger, almost 3 times bigger than the deal they had with Adidas previously. Got new sponsorships from Verizon, Tissot, first timekeeper sponsor of the NBA, and even Tencent, a Chinese internet company. About $700 million for 5 years. They signed the deal in 2015. On top of all this, approximately 10 teams are expected to sign new contracts for local TV deals at the end of the 2017-2018 season, at least twice the value of their previous deal. All of this money, all of these flows, this has led to the average NBA franchise increasing their value 13% over the last year, the average value now being 1.25 billion. With all this money flowing around, it makes me wonder, if possible, would investing in essentially any NBA team be a good investment? Now let's take a look at some of these franchise values, as well as their 2015 revenues. The top 5 teams, the New York Knicks, Los Angeles Lakers, Chicago Bulls, Boston Celtics, and Los Angeles Clippers, are worth more than $2 billion. It's pretty high. Also, if you take a look at the revenue multiples, which, by the way, as I mentioned in a previous video, the revenue multiple is the most ideal way to look at how an investment risk is perceived. If there's a lot of risk, then it probably will have a lower multiple. If there's less risk, it will have a higher multiple. And it looks like this list shows it as well. As you move further down the list, the multiples seem to decline. So let's figure out if this is actually true, if we're still following that methodology, that kind of thought process. And let's apply the PVGO thought process to it. Let's see what we got. Let's see what we come up with. So let's start off the PVGO thought process with step 1, which is choose the economic benefit. In this case, I'll be using the 3-year average EBITDA, which is operating income plus depreciation and amortization, since those two are the key non-cash expenses. I'm using a 3-year average to account for cyclicality in profits, different parts of like the economic cycle, as well as team rosters. Maybe there's some turnover there, and you can't really truly evaluate a company unless, well, in this case, a franchise, unless you kind of see how they do over time. Looking at 1 year might not be enough. As you can see, there's no surprise for the top 3 teams, the Lakers, Knicks, and Bulls, having the highest operating income per se. And the only unprofitable team on, at least in this metric, is the Brooklyn Nets. There's a lot of questions about their management, and since I cannot use the PVGO thought process with a negative number, I will be forced to use revenues to evaluate the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the next part of the PVGO thought process is to find out the relative risk through the discount rate. Now, I have looked deep into Forbes methodology and deciding how to come up with these valuations, and I've determined the key factors that impacted the franchise values. These factors include population of metro area, new local TV contracts and or arenas, sports attendance, total revenue, and total debt to value. Now, I made a few changes to those key factors to determine the relative safety of a team based on my analysis. I do agree with Forbes for the population of the immediate area as most important. It is the most important factor. I mean, it's not a lot of people around. I mean, it doesn't matter how well your team does. You can't really, it's not that much of a ceiling. However, I ultimately believe the size of those TV contracts and potential new arenas will depend on the quality of product on the court. This is why I'm considering the number of potential franchise players on each team. This is also an important factor for overall sports attendance, but gate revenue better captures how many individual fans come to the arena. You can have a lot of corporations in an area, but that doesn't mean, and they might pack out the house. They might pack out an arena. But that doesn't necessarily mean the fans are behind you. So I mean, if your team's very favorable, your gate revenue should be higher. Lastly, I am a big fan of operating margins. The higher the margins, the less sales you need to really have some profits. It's all about the profitability at the end of the day. So I pay attention to that and also agree with Forbes with debt to value. These are the factors I use to determine the relative risk of each franchise. Now, based on this criteria, here are the discount rates calculated for each franchise. Once again, Knicks, Lakers, and Bulls are the safest investments, just based on the list based on the adjustments I've made. Conversely, I have to use a much higher discount rate for the Brooklyn Nets. Look, revenues is much higher. It's much higher than profits. Almost 7 times higher if you take that EBITDA margin and find the inverse. Almost 7 times higher. So by default, take the Brooklyn Nets, take what I did calculate for their number, and just multiply by 7. It kind of throws off some of the numbers, especially the averages, but overall, that's what has to be done. If you're an unprofitable company, you just got to find a different way to value them. And last step includes finding the no growth value and breakdown of growth expectations for each franchise, as well as the implied growth rates. To learn more about this process, please check out my very first video, the PVGO Thought Process for Equity Valuation Part 1. I provide the link to the video below. Now, overall, the average PVGO percentage across all NBA franchises is approximately 75%. What this leads to is approximately 19% compounded annual growth rates in profits over a 10-year span, or just growing at 9% annually over a 20-year span. And overall, the expectation is a 7 times return on investment. One concept to remember, the growth rates are over very long investment horizons. In that very first video, I just mentioned, at least for stock market valuations, the best horizon I've found is somewhere between 3 to 7 years. So going out 10 or even 20 years, thinking that, for example, growing at just 2 or 3% a year annually for the next 20 years is guaranteed, it might not be. Sounds very plausible now, but just something to keep in mind. To better illustrate that, let's take the Dallas Mavericks and the Utah Jazz. Based on their respective valuations, the annual growth rates kind of baked into their valuations over 10 and 20 year investment horizons are about 14.5% and 7% respectively. But growing, for example, for that 7%, growing at that same rate annually for 20 years leads to that expected ROI being almost 4 times. Meaning $1 today, 20 years from now should be worth $4. Small percentages go a long way over the long haul. Now, the point of this presentation is to find out what would I, or maybe you as a fan in the NBA, which franchises would you invest in? Of course, this is a pure hypothetical, but if I had a couple $1 billion just laying around and maybe just even a couple $100 million and wanted to become a minority owner in a franchise. It's an important distinction here, minority owner. These are some of the qualities that I would look for when evaluating if a franchise has the long-term potential to meet or even exceed those growth expectations I found. First is a track record of good management decisions. That's enough said on that. That should be well known. Second, I would like to have strong fan support relative to the other sports teams in the area. I don't want to buy an NBA franchise in a baseball football town, to be honest. That makes it kind of tough. I want to be where basketball has the potential to be the sport of the city, or it already is the sport of the city. Third, I'd like to have a team that has potential to do really well in the next 1 to 3 years. If a team is very young and has potential to be a title contender, then I'll give them consideration. I mean, to me, that's very important. I mean, if you're a title contender in general, that's very important. It's kind of a good way to say, hey, my investment is going to pay off. I will really be able to meet those growth expectations. And lastly, I will pay close attention to the demographics of the metro area. I would like to be in a city that is experiencing positive economic growth and has a lot of corporations around, since they're actually the true customers of the NBA, more so than the fans. So here are the obvious choices of teams to invest in. You got the top four, the Knicks, Lakers, Bulls, and Celtics. I mean, they're historical franchises in major markets, especially the Knicks and Lakers, as they are the only franchises that won't require a long holding period to be a good investment. I mean, there's essentially no growth expectations baked in for those two particular franchises. I mean that's pretty good. That is actually really good. Some of the other obvious choices, at least to me, include the Warriors. I mean, they have four legit franchise players. I'll say that. I wouldn't say, I was about to say superstars. I would say franchise players. And of course, it's the favorite to win championship this year. And to be honest, they're becoming the team of Silicon Valley. I mean, I know San Francisco has kind of an identity more as a baseball town, but something tells me that's starting to change. You got the Cavaliers, they just won the championship. I mean, just based on that alone, their value is going to go up from the number I just presented to you, since these numbers are from the beginning of 2016. And at least in my opinion, LeBron James is good management. And of course, we got the Spurs. I mean, you got excellent management, consistent winning, championship pedigree, and they're the only major sports franchise in San Antonio. Let's look at some that are maybe not as obvious to a regular fan, but looking deeper in, these are great choices. First off, the other Texas teams, the Mavericks and the Rockets, will be tremendous investments. For Dallas, the metro area dynamics are very favorable, and I trust both Mark Cuban's and Rick Carlisle's decision making. And for Houston, they have the lowest growth expectations right after the Knicks and Lakers. I mean, the valuation is very good for them. Although I'm not 100% sold on management, they do have a star player, James Harden, in a system that he can flourish in and can lead to some consistent winning. The metro area, although somewhat stagnated, still in the Rockets' favor. And they are, at least in my opinion, the main team in Houston, because the Texans are, the Texans. Because of these reasons, I believe either team, either the Rockets or the Mavericks, will definitely be able to meet and probably even exceed those growth expectations baked into their valuations. And definitely will be two teams to invest in if given the chance. Next will be the Toronto Raptors. The city is growing, the city of Toronto. The team has 2 all-star players, and seeing where they came from, I definitely trust management's judgment. Next on my list would be the Thunder. They are the only team in OKC. I mean, if you see just the fan support, it's how they pack the house every game you see. They have a superstar in Russell Westbrook. By himself, yes, I know, but something tells me they're gonna get their fair share of wins. And believe it or not, I actually trust management. Some of their moves have been questionable, but hindsight's 2020, and looking forward, I can see what they were seeing. Last would actually be the 76ers. Although they have been at the bottom in terms of wins and have a fair amount of growth expectations baked into their valuation, they have two potential franchise players, Joel Embiid and just the #1 pick, Simmons. I mean, it's tough not to get behind that. And I trust Jerry Colangelo, the new general manager of the team. Also, let's not forget that Philly is still one of the largest cities in the country. And if the 76ers start winning, even though it's a football town, when football season's not around, the 76ers could get all the attention. Now, let's look at some teams that, first of all, they're just completely overvalued. And even with that being said, I would probably avoid at all costs. I mean, to me, I'm picking these more based off of the growth expectations baked in, but some of them, yeah, we should just run away from. First are the Washington Wizards. Although they are in a great city and have two franchise players in Bradley Beal and John Wall, I'm not 100% sure of management's judgment. Plus, the team itself seems to be on the decline. Maybe in terms of wins, don't know about the culture there. And there's a lot of competition for fans with the Redskins, Nationals. I mean, they're both being more competitive. Both of those teams are doing well. And if Washington continues to decline, it's just not a good look. Next will be the Kings. I have no faith in management whatsoever. The Metro Dynamics are questionable, and the team may trade away their only franchise player at any point. I mean, DeMarcus Cousins can be out the door tomorrow. Since the mid-2000s, this team has been a disaster, and I don't expect any different going forward. Plus, they have a lot of growth expectations baked into their valuation. Next will be the Hornets. Although the Metro Dynamics are pretty good, I don't trust Michael Jordan as owner. You always make that case, greatest basketball player of all time. And I don't know about that owner thing. Also, I feel like they reached their full potential for wins last season. I mean, I don't know if they can really go any much higher than that. That might be good enough, but you take that in consideration. I don't know about. I think they reached their ceiling. Plus, you still got the Carolina Panthers there. I mean, keep all those things in consideration. I don't think they can meet the high growth expectations baked into their evaluation. And last will be the Bucks. They have a lot of young talent on the roster, but I'm unsure about management and the city. Plus, I think the entire state cares more about the Green Bay Packers, to be honest. And there's similar to all the other ones I've chosen, just too much expectations, too much to overcome to meet those expectations. Now, in conclusion, overall, I believe that for a minority stake, just to get in on the action, most teams are good investments since owners stick around for usually a long time, usually longer than 20 years. And like I showed you before, even with those lower numbers, even growing at 4% a year, growing profits at 4% a year, it is somewhat achievable over the long haul. And to be honest, if looking to buy a team outright, if we really want to talk about that, just about any team is on the table. I mean, you can make a case for all four of the teams I just listed off. I mean, you can make the case for Washington, make the case for Charlotte, make the case for the Bucks. I would make a case for Sacramento. I just think you just gotta stay away from that. I think that's the worst one to try to invest in. So that's one point. Another point, as I mentioned before, the safest investments tend to have the highest values. The safest franchises usually lead to the highest. Doesn't mean that a risky team or a team with a higher risk profile, let's just say that, higher risk profile isn't a good investment. It's just a little bit harder to justify. I mean, I mentioned before the 76ers. If you go back a couple of slides, you see that there's a fair amount of growth expectations baked in, even over a 10 and 20 year period. It's a little bit harder to justify, but oh well. I mean, if you have that belief, if you really believe so, then it's a good thing. just know that the safer the team, the better. Lastly, even in this hypothetical scenario, we need to keep in mind the real reason why people want to buy teams. For those who have the means to do so, have the resources, it's mainly for sentimental value, aka a franchise is bought just as a trophy. I mean, just to say I have one. I mean, you got some owners that truly care and want to bring the best product to their fans, but some just like, hey, I got a team. Let's bring some of the guys over into my club room. I don't know, but I mean, to me, that's the only way you can really explain Steve Ballmer's decision to buy the Clippers for $2 billion, when at the time their valuation was around $600 million. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, right now he's turned it. I mean, the Clippers are worth approximately how much he paid for it, so it makes sense. I'm just saying he probably could have pulled it off with $1 billion or $1.5 billion instead of going all the way. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you kind of have an idea what your favorite team, your favorite franchise is worth, as well as if you would invest in them or not. Once again, just give me some ideas. If you would like me to take this another step further, I'm already planning on doing this as once the Forbes update their list, beginning of 2017, and thinking about doing it for football franchises and even soccer or football, the other football. Okay, all right. Thank you so much for your time, and until the next one, peace.